Hey, what's up, Street Talks? Eric Kim from the Eric Kim Street Photography blog. So this is a little special treat. We got Cindy and what's my name?
I don't know.
Eric. So we wanted to use this chance to just kind of reflect on 2018 and some big wins. So the first thing I want to talk about is dun, 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 dun. My first published book with Optic Press, which is Suits. So Cindy, can you were actually the impetus to publish this book, and you're the one who encouraged me to print this book. Can you share why you wanted me to print the book? Because I had already made it available online as a free ebook as well, and talk a little bit about the process and also you as a publisher.
So first off, as many of you know, Eric's been working on this project for a very long time, about 6 years now, since the beginning. And what I loved about the project was that it's one of the few projects that can span geographically around the world, but have a unifying theme that's quite provocative and inspiring in a way, very reflective. So like Eric said, he made the book as a free ebook online, but what I've talked about before in my other video is that bringing things into the material world is just so it's so meaningful to be able to touch the photos, to feel the haptic response from the photos, and that's why I really wanted to still kind of create it into a book format, even though I love digital, but I also love libraries, love book collecting. I know there's a long tradition of that as well, so I wanted to honor Eric's long-term project and help Eric by putting it into layout form, designing it. I did the design here, and then Anna actually did a hand-drawn illustrated cover design inspired by one of Eric's photos. So it was a collaborative process that I really loved working with Eric, and also I don't know about you, but when you can help someone else to kind of create something that kind of embodies someone else's vision and long-term project, it was just really inspiring as a partner to be able to bring Eric's work into reality.
Yeah, and I think one thing I really want to mention too is that so much of what happens at Haptic, the blog, printing, publishing, and all the products we create, Cindy is like my flux capacitor. She is kind of the individual who kind of is like my jetpack. She kind of is like the twin turbo inside my my Lambo, because I feel that with myself, I'm obviously busy blogging, photographing, making videos, but there's always a point where your bandwidth is maxed out. So for all the peoples out there, I want to give Cindy a public shout out. For myself as photographer artist, seeing your book published, it's such an amazing feeling, and I would actually encourage more of us photographers to self-publish, because I think there's this strange notion that the only way to become a legitimate artist is to be discovered by somebody else, to not self-promote yourself, not push yourself out there, and let everyone else do all the dirty work of the promotion. Why do you think, Cindy, there's such a negative bias against self-publishing?
I mean, I think part of it is, so coming from history of the book and history of publishing, is that thinking about publishing, it becomes a bit of a demystified process. You think of there's the artist, there's some type of wall between the artist and the customer or consumer or the reader or the person that receives the ultimate art product. And that wall could be certain institutions such as art galleries, to publishers, to academia, and that's a field that I come from. And while I recognize the importance of those types of institutions to create a certain rigor in terms of a rigor standard, but also a way of continuity in art production, I also see that wall or that institution as a wall. I mean, I think with the internet and with a lot of the ways that we've been thinking about in terms of open source and just connection and reducing kind of the inequality, is that these walls or these institutions become walls between people, and then it also becomes walls between for artists to create, because then you're feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm not a legitimate anything, artist, academic person, until I get legitimized by these institutions. So what I love about self-publishing or independent publishing is that we get to disrupt that model, and it's different. I'm not saying I mean, we differ a little bit on this, but I still believe in these institutions, but I also believe in empowering artists in new ways, and that's through self-publishing or through Optic, which is now we call ourselves independent publishers, that we get to own the means of production. We get to create ourselves, and we get to connect with you, the readers, and the ultimate kind of people that inspire our production as well.
Yeah, one notion that I really want to share with you too is something that I've been promoting for a long time.
Autofocus.
Autofocus. Buy books, not gear. So the reason I bring this up is because books increase in value over time, and books, information, and knowledge generally tend to have a lasting effect, because I feel like even with any sort of book that you might get, even if any book that you get could give you at least one empowering idea, I think it's worth it. And trust me, I'm a digital native. I love all my digital tools, whatever. But there's something really practical about having a notebook, having a handbook, doing things by hand. And I think there's actually a lot of intelligence in our hand. This is why whenever I have the opportunity, I try to read handwritten books. Even with books like we publish, like Street Hunt, it's just so nice too, because you could take the book and you could physically put it in your front pocket. And I think there's a huge value to standalone books, standalone devices, because people say, oh, why not just put it in my iPad or put it in my iPhone, whatever. And I think that's fantastic. But there's something about having a physical printed book, which I think is very valuable. Cindy, can you grab a Masters real quick?
Yeah.
And I think one of the books I'm actually very, very proud of is our book Masters. So to get a sense of it, take a look at all that beautiful red foil on it. And it's my famous Laughing Lady photos with all the Masters. So Cindy, can you share with the process of how you distilled this book? Because I think Masters is an interesting book, because I took all my lessons that I learned from the Masters of street photography, and I have like 1 trillion words and articles on the blog. Cindy, how did you take this ground chunk of information and distill it into a nice steak?
Yeah, I still remember this. We were sitting in Maru, and this was already after like week 3 of trying to distill this book. And we were like really energetic from cacao nibs and cocoa and all this and chocolate.
Missed that, yeah.
And I was just like, Eric, the information is great, but there's just so much of it, and it's so hard to just pick up and comprehend. So I was like, okay, I know I'm not going to be able to create a book that encapsulates everything, because I think that's the original Masters ebook, which is available online through the blog for free.
So it's Google 100 lessons from the Masters of street photography.
So I thought, okay, how about this? We create, I will distill as much of the key lessons as possible, the foundational fundamental lessons, and like kind of extrapolate that. So it was like, imagine playing this game where you had like it was like 1 billion puzzle pieces of
2 billion
belong to different puzzles, and I had to like piece together which puzzle piece went with which puzzle, and also what was the most interesting. So we did that, and we created Masters Volume 1. And one thing I decided, which I think is a good lesson in creation, is that let's not think about this as a totally final product. Let's call this Volume 1, and we can make Volume 2 and 3 and 4 in the future as we figure out, like, if this type of format works, or what other types of lessons we want in the subsequent publications.
Well, one thing I think was very ambitious too is that I think a lot of us actually want to self-publish more of our works, but we just like literally don't know how to design it and print it. So Cindy, you've self-taught yourself Adobe InDesign. Can you describe what that process was like, and for other people who might want to self-publish their own ebooks, their own print books, like what are some like quick tips you would have for Adobe InDesign, which is a very, very complicated and non-intuitive tool to use? I really hate the program. I think It's unfortunately it's the least bad product we have out there to make books.
So, okay, so there's some positive. The good news is, as photographers, you're probably familiar with Adobe Lightroom and Photoshop, and maybe you've played with Illustrator when you were trying to design a logo or something. So that's the good news. The bad news is InDesign could be as powerful as you want it to be. So sometimes you're like, I just want a simple book, and I just want photo. Like if you want that, then probably don't use InDesign, because that is, I don't know, InDesign is too powerful and too memory heavy to be doing that type of work. A lot of Google's my best friend in terms of learning and Googling and looking around and figuring out things. But I think what helps is trying to think about, especially if you're going to print the book, think about like how it's going to feel. So you can take kind of examples from other magazines or books and things like that. And when we designed Masters, we really wanted, we wanted it to still fit in your hand. We wanted like when I sourced the paper and printed it locally in California, we still wanted something that was unique and heavy and haptic about it. What was fun and experimental was thinking about, we wanted it to be a different type of layout too, that wasn't like other books. So I was inspired by kind of more like high fashion Vogue type magazines, which is how I kind of created this layout, which was based off a template, and then I recreated my own templates as well. And then, I played heavily with the crop, which I know is like controversial, but I'm like, this is obviously a very cropped photo, but to bring the imagery and the words together in this fun way.
And you also published a digital edition of it as well. Yeah,
so Anna helped with that. Anna helped to turn this print edition into a digital edition, which if you're thinking about putting together a book, especially these days with independent publishing, it's great to think about them together. It's not as difficult to, when you already have one, like either the print or the digital, and then to create both. And the other thing that, I love real things, as you know, like I love getting things in the mail. I love the joy of that. But also, there's other logistical things you have to deal with. Is thinking about like shipping and making sure the thing like arrives to like people that purchase your books and things like that safely.
And one thing that I thought was super cool and innovative we created this year was
so dramatic, Harry. Dun 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 dun.
Dun 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 dun. So Cindy, what are we looking at?
This was this year. This was an epic
Was it this year? Oh my god.
Oh my goodness. So we actually envisioned this as we created the honoree strap actually like 6 years ago. We've been designing this for 6 years. It's called the Eric Kim case. And we wanted to design something that was a case that could fit neatly the Ricoh or actually any other small point and shoot camera, film or digital. And the tricky thing with these cases is that we love single use things, but we also kind of like the idea of multiple use things. So we're like, okay, can we design a case that's also could hold other things like SD cards? Can it also hold other things like film? And can we also figure out a way to attach it to things like our belt or attach it to like another bag? And that's why it took 6 years to design this. We also kind of conceptualized it with the Eric Kim neck strap so that we can still actually attach. Eric's attached the camera to the strap, and then he's looped the case within it, or the camera throughout the case. So we created something that was kind of
revolutionary.
All these functions.
Yeah, and I don't think anything like this ever was created. And the cool thing is, obviously we optimized it for the Ricoh GR2, hashtag Ricoh Mafia. But also, thanks to my buddy Aaron Fezer, who hooked it up with the new Fujifilm XF10, which I've been testing the last few days and I actually really like. And it's about the same thickness and size as the Ricoh. And the test is, will it fit inside the Eric Kim case? Let's see. And it is a WinRAR. So you can see, nice and snug in there. And this is the Eric Kim case in Phantom Black. The best way to just pick up one is just go to hapticindustries.com.
Oops. We're also in my family's house, so you will hear periodic dogs barking.
And also we have it in beautiful crema brown. So this is actually a really, really dope thing to have. One thing also I wanted to talk about Cindy is a lot of people are curious, just like, you know, Cindy is kind of this mysterious behind the scenes individual and Eric usually the on-camera personality. Do you ever feel like, oh, like in Eric Kim's shadow, or like, well, how's your identity? Because I mean, obviously people don't know that Haptic Industries is you. You are Haptic Industries. You're the CEO of Haptic. And it's almost like I'm your creative collaborator who helps you market and brand this stuff. And obviously I help you design the products. But you are in fact the boss and the heavyweight. And I think a lot of people don't know that. Or they don't even know that Haptic is owned by us. They think it's just like some other company.
Yeah.
So what are your personal thoughts on that?
So I think there's something great about us working together as husband and wife, as partners, and then because of that, I think at the core of it, we both have to detach our ego a little bit. It doesn't happen all the time, but I think, I mean, both of us, we've talked about this a lot, is that like when one person succeeds, we're both succeeding, and we see each other as an entity, as a synderic together. So it's, in that case, I think it helps because like we see each other as a partnership, and that's Eric and Cindy behind the camera. Like, you probably don't see that directly through the blog or through the products, but that's who we are, is that we support one another through all our creative endeavors. Eric has probably read my dissertation a billion times and has edited it and helped me and scanned things. So like that's also kind of the invisible labor or work that goes behind one individual. So even though you might see like the Eric Kim brand or the Eric Kim blog and whatnot, like, you know, he, like as he mentioned, is so much of like the Eric Kim empire. Eric Kim brand is so much a product of
Eric Kim empire.
of like, you know, his work with me, and he's talked a lot about his mom and the fact that we are able to like stay here at my mom's house. So my family, of course, like everyone out there who's been supporting us and supporting Eric since day one, like that's, I think, what is tricky about the internet is that, and maybe like American celebritydom or Hollywood, is that we think like one person did it all, like a superhero, and then kind of like the lone wolf, like doing everything. But honestly, like we're all, no man's an island. Like we're all together. We gotta support one another in different ways.
I also, one thing that I was thinking about is, man, we did a lot in 2018. We were in January, or last year in December, we did another Reflections video. That was in Marseille. Then we went to Lisbon with our moms. Then where else did we go?
We were in London, cold London, and that's where we made this street hunt.
Shout out to Simon, Lisa, and Ezra.
Yeah, and Annette for designing this cute cover. What happened? Went to London, and then we maybe went to Boston. You did a few. New York. Did a few workshops. Went to Japan, where I was writing for 3 months, and I believe that's when we launched the Udemy course. So if you want to check out 2 Udemy courses that you can, again, all of this is in hapticindustries.com. So if you want to check us out and support us, thank you for that. Udemy courses, Cindy Project.
Open it up.
Okay, so the art project, Cindy Project.
So for you guys who don't know the Cindy Project, this is the Cindy from the Cindy Project.
Me?
And this one. And I think it's really sweet because very rarely do, here, I'll stand up and I'll focus on it. So very rarely do the subjects of the photographs actually become the producers of the photographs. So Cindy Project was essentially an art portfolio project that was made by Cindy and photos of Cindy. And what's very unique about Cindy project is the fact that it's printed on this ZA notebook paper, which is archival up to 5,000 years. It's created, handmade in Vietnam. And we supported the local artisans who produced this paper. And it's quite possibly some of the most beautiful paper I've ever felt and touched. And there's beautiful micro irregularities which make it more like kind of more soulful, and there's texture and soul to it. And Cindy essentially created this project over the course of almost like 2 years. And so Cindy is the subject of these photos, obviously. And it's the purpose of this project is to really document my love that I have for Cindy and our creative collaboration project together. And you made this poem, Cindy, which is subject, not object. Maybe you could read it to us.
All right. Okay. All right. What is the photographic moment? It is a song, a record of the playful dance between photographer and subject. Where is the photographic moment? It is everywhere and nowhere, an attempt to extend that sweet something while surrendering to the transience of life. Who is the photographic moment? She exudes power in her vulnerability. She speaks, contests, collaborates. She lives, sống. Sống means to live in Vietnamese.
And so, Cindy, why did you want to create, like, okay, so there's a lot of controversy about, photographers like Iraqi who might have used photos of his creative collaborators and didn't give them credit, etc. So, Cindy, why did you make Cindy Project, and how does it feel like to be the own curator of your own image?
Yeah, so this... Should I put this in?
Yeah, you can put it in. I can hold it.
So, anyone who follows Eric's blog and seen his videos, Eric takes a lot of photos of me. And at first, I think it was sweet and cute, but I thought, like, as Eric became more famous and as I'm developing my own professional identity outside of Eric, I was just like a little bit uncertain about the power of the image and these images, and like if it was me and if where it was going, how it circulates and all that. So I think we created Cindy Project together as this like very conscious meditation reflection on this relationship between the photographer and the subject. And what's so powerful about it is that it reflects who we are as partners, but also it shows more. Sorry, I got distracted by our dogs barking a second. It kind of turns photography in an introspective way, thinking about like what is this role of the image and what does it do. It does capture this fleeting moment, but that tension between photographer and subject. And I think there aren't that many cases in which there's been, I mean, from like the Me Too movement to like a lot of controversy with Iraqi and another. There's a tension like who owns the image? Is it the subject matter? Is it the photographer? Is it the publisher? And because of that, like we wanted to kind of take all this sense of like ownership and tension and reflect upon it on this project. And for me as a subject, it was a very empowering moment to work together with Eric on that.
Yeah, because I think one thing I'm very grateful for is you're probably the best creative collaborator and also model. Isn't it annoying that I'm just always taking pictures of you? And there's also a lot of people out there who want to photograph their partners or their kids, but they're like, oh, my partner hates being photographed, or my kid hates being photographed. What kind of encouragement or advice or tips would you give to people? Because you know what it's like to be on the other side of the camera.
Yeah, I think for me, in terms of just what's helped me is to think about the image not as an objective, absolute encapsulation of who I am. Because I think a lot, unfortunately, in American culture and a lot of places is that we have a very distorted sense of like very negative sense of like body image, both for men and women. And I think, and what happens is that then a lot of people are uncomfortable by their own image. And I think because of that, it really makes it difficult to think about, because then when Eric's photographing me, I try to separate myself out. I respect that he's making there's a creative process, and I try to look at the photograph or that I know he's capturing, and I try to distance that. It's like I think about it as it not being me, like the entire encapsulation of me, but just a creative rendition, interpretation of me. And for that, like by detaching my ego from the image, it's helped me a lot to think about how the image circulates, but also like how to encourage Eric's creative process.
And one thing that I really want to encourage with the Cindy project is that everyone has a Cindy in their life. And shout out to my buddy Josh White, who taught me that photographing your loved ones is actually often more important than photographing strangers. So I really want to encourage more people through Cindy project to photograph their loved ones in artistic and artful ways. I think, why is it that we spend so much of our time trying to travel the world and photograph all these exotic peoples and exotic places where sometimes, most often, the most beautiful people are actually right next to us. And I think sometimes it's easy to think that, forget about the beautiful peoples in your life. Like I was looking at Cindy, and wait, Cindy, look that way. So I really like the catchlight in her eyes. Just looks super epic.
Eric, I think we're still on camera.
Wait, one more. Look at that way.
This way?
Yeah.
I don't know, Eric. How's the autofocus on this XF10?
Not that great.
I hear it. I'm like,
it's really struggling. Okay, so okay. So just to wrap things up, is there any question you have? Last question for me, Cindy?
So 2018 is concluding. What are your what's next for Eric Kim in 2019?
So besides buying a pink Lamborghini.
Not happening. Not happening.
I think I was thinking a lot about how I could maximize my impact in the world and to make a positive change. And I think right now my focus is encouraging and empowering more people to become entrepreneurs. So even if you're watching this video, I mean, I kind of assume you're an entrepreneur. And I was actually thinking about it too, is that entrepreneurship ain't about becoming financially independent or location independent or rich or
financial independence,
retire early. I think these notions are a little bit silly. To me, entrepreneurship it's about risk taking and it's about attempting. Mm-hmm. I really like the French word essay, like the English word essay. When you write an essay, you're just attempting to put forth an idea. And I actually really like the word attempt too, because it's quite humble in the sense that it focuses more on the attempt or the risk taking or trying something new or pushing your boundaries, not so much the final effect, because I don't think success or failure really matters, because both are a little bit, so like for example, let's say I attempt something and I'm successful. Honestly, like once you're successful in that thing, it's a little bit anticlimactic. It's like, okay, that's nice. On to the next one. Mm-hmm. And if you fail, of course, it's easy to get discouraged. But I feel like focusing on attempting more is really essential. Like, let me give an example. So last week, I deadlifted 435 pounds. And today, I attempted 440 pounds. And I didn't get it up all the way. I only got up halfway. So some people might say, oh, you failed. But to me, I'm like, it's not even about success or failure. It's more of like, did I just attempt a higher weight? So I just attempted to lift 5 more pounds this week than I did last week. And so always attempting to push my limits, push my boundaries is what's interesting to me. So if you're watching this, if you're interested in attempting more, becoming more, pushing your own personal limits, I think